On Friday, January 27, 2023, Nicola Bulley began her morning in the small Lancashire village of St. Michael's-on-Wyre in the same way she had countless times before. At 8:26 a.m., she left her home on the outskirts of the village with her brown and white Springer Spaniel, Willow. She was dressed for the cold January air. A long black chalet jacket, black jeans, and green Wellington boots. Underneath, she wore a black Engelbert Strauss coat, the one she wore almost every morning for her riverside walks. At 8:40 a.m., she dropped her 2 young daughters off at school. This was a fixed part of her weekday routine. From there, she drove to the nearby car park at Lower Blackpool Lane, just a short walk from the River Wyre. It was a path she knew well, an open route along the riverbank popular with dog walkers and joggers. Shortly after parking, Nicola set out towards the iron footbridge that crosses the Wyre. Willow, as usual, was off the lead, darting in and out of the grass and undergrowth. At 8:46 a.m., she was seen by a fellow dog walker she knew casually. They exchanged a greeting before going their separate ways. At 8:53 a.m., Nicola sent a quick text message to a friend confirming a playdate for later that week. By 8:59 a.m., she had logged into a Microsoft Teams call for work. She kept her camera and microphone switched off, but she was actively listening. At 9:10 a.m., another dog walker saw her at the upper fields section of the path. Nicola was walking along the river, phone in one hand, Willow nearby. Nothing in her manner suggested distress. This would be the last confirmed sighting of her alive. At 9:20 a.m., her phone remained connected to the team's call. It would stay online until 9:30 a.m. Sometime between 9:18 a.m. and 9:30 a.m., Nicola's phone ended up on a wooden bench overlooking a steep section of the riverbank. Willow's harness lay on the ground between the bench and the water's edge. At 9:33 a.m., another dog walker arrived. They found Willow running loose, seemingly agitated. The harness was on the ground and the phone, still connected to the call, rested on the bench. There was no sign of Nicola. At 10:50 a.m., after the school was contacted to check if Nicola had returned there, she was officially reported missing. Within minutes, police officers arrived on the scene. Given the circumstances, a phone, a dog, and no sign of the woman, they classified her as high risk almost immediately. This classification, rarely applied to a healthy adult, triggered a rapid escalation in resources. By the early afternoon, multiple search units were operating. The river was scoured by police divers, banks searched by foot patrols, and overhead surveillance was deployed via drones and helicopters. The search zone stretched for miles downstream, taking into account the tidal pull of the Wyre and its connection to the Irish Sea. But in the crucial first 24 hours, no trace of Nicola or any sign of an incident was found. By the morning of January 28th, less than 24 hours after Nicola Bulley was last seen, the small village of St. Michael's-on-Wyre had transformed into the center of a high-profile missing person search. The Lancashire police publicly confirmed the timeline and details of her disappearance. Their working hypothesis, revealed unusually early in the investigation, was that Nicola had fallen into the River Wyre. From the outset, the police committed substantial resources to the river theory. Specialist dive teams from Lancashire Fire and Rescue and the Northwest Underwater Search Unit scoured the riverbed. Helicopters scanned the river's course all the way to the estuary. This singular focus raised questions among locals and later, the public at large. There were no signs of a struggle near the bench, no disturbance in the mud along the bank, and no drag marks. Willow, though agitated, was dry, an unusual detail if the dog had attempted to follow its owner into the water. In the first days, police confirmed 3 key witness statements. A man who saw Nicola on the upper field section at 9:10 a.m., consistent with CCTV timestamps. Another who discovered Willow running loose at 9:33 a.m. A third, who spotted the harness lying between the bench and the riverbank. But beyond these, there was nothing. No additional sightings, no CCTV of her leaving the area, and no vehicle footage suggesting she left by road. By January 29th, the search effort had expanded beyond the river. Abandoned buildings, outbuildings, and overgrown patches of land within the village limits were searched. At the same time, an independent specialist team, Specialist Group International, SGI, was brought in. Led by diver Peter Falding, SGI deployed advanced side-scan sonar technology. Their equipment could produce high-resolution imagery of the riverbed, capable of detecting small objects. For 3 days, SGI swept the river from the bench area down to the tidal estuary. Nothing matching Nicola's description was found. As the days passed without progress, the case began to attract national media coverage. Reporters camped near the search site, capturing footage of search teams and interviewing villagers. The public response was swift, and in some cases, intrusive. Social media users began conducting their own investigations, visiting the area, live-streaming their walks along the riverbank, and speculating openly about Nicola's personal life. 10 days into the search, police held a press conference. They repeated their belief that Nicola had fallen into the river, despite the absence of physical evidence. They suggested she may have slipped due to the steep banking and entered the cold water unexpectedly. However, the water level was relatively low that morning, and currents in that section of the river were not especially strong, a fact later acknowledged by divers. Despite the police's stance, several alternative theories began circulating. 1. Voluntary disappearance. Some speculated that Nicola may have left intentionally, citing the absence of signs of a struggle. However, no CCTV or vehicle sightings supported this. 2. Third-party involvement, a more sinister theory that suggested Nicola may have been taken by someone. This was weakened by the lack of forensic evidence in the area. 3. Accidental fall elsewhere, the possibility that she fell into the river at a different point than assumed, possibly further downstream where the banks are more exposed. Each theory had its flaws, and as February progressed, the absence of answers only amplified the tension. Friends and family grew increasingly frustrated with the singular focus on the river. Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, voiced his doubts to the media. "If Nicola had fallen in there, I'm convinced the divers would have found her by now." Meanwhile, Nicola's parents publicly begged for fresh lines of inquiry, stating they feared something had happened to her. By mid-February, over 2 weeks had passed since Nicola was last seen. The search effort was still heavily concentrated along the Wyre, but now, behind the scenes, quiet doubts were growing. The disappearance of Nicola Bulley was no longer just a local mystery. It was becoming one of the most publicly scrutinized missing person cases in recent British history. On February 15, 2023, nearly 3 weeks after Nicola Bulley's disappearance, the investigation took an unexpected turn. At a press conference that day, Lancashire police revealed personal details about Nicola's mental health struggles in the weeks prior to her disappearance. They stated she had been classified as a high-risk missing person due to significant issues with alcohol brought on by struggles with the menopause. The decision to release such private information was met with immediate backlash from the public, media, and even members of parliament. Critics accused the police of victim-blaming and damaging Nicola's reputation while she was still missing. For her family, the statement was devastating, but it also reignited attention on the case. On the morning of February 19th, a couple walking their dog noticed something unusual in the reeds along a stretch of the River Wyre about 1 mile downstream from the bench. The area, near a bend in the river, was partially concealed by undergrowth and not easily visible from the main footpath. They contacted police immediately. Search teams quickly descended on the location. By the afternoon, a body had been recovered from the water. Though formal identification would take time, the location, clothing, and physical description made it clear to investigators that this was almost certainly Nicola Bulley. 2 days later, on February 21st, police confirmed it. The body was Nicola's. The discovery brought a form of closure, but not the kind many had hoped for. The location of Nicola's body raised pressing questions. This section of river had been searched repeatedly in the first days of the investigation, both by police divers and SGI sonar equipment. How could she have been missed? Some experts suggested that water conditions in the Wyre could cause a body to become temporarily lodged beneath undergrowth or debris, only to resurface later. Others questioned whether the body had been in that location since the morning she disappeared. no conclusive evidence emerged to settle the matter. In June 2023, the inquest into Nicola's death concluded. The coroner ruled that she had drowned accidentally, entering the water on the morning of January 27th. There was no sign of third-party involvement, no evidence of assault, and no indication of suicide. The ruling stated that cold water shock, a sudden and involuntary gasp reflex caused by immersion in cold water, was the likely cause of her drowning. Temperatures that morning were near freezing, and the river's depth near the bench reached several meters in certain spots. Despite the official conclusion, the case left lasting controversy. 1. Police conduct. The decision to disclose Nicola's private medical history damaged trust between Lancashire police and the public. An independent review later criticized aspects of the force's communication strategy. 2. Public intrusion. The flood of amateur investigators who descended on St. Michael's disrupted the lives of residents and complicated the search effort. Some entered private property, live-streamed from sensitive areas, and spread unfounded rumors online. 3. Unanswered doubts. For some, the question of how Nicola's body avoided detection for so long remains unresolved. For her partner, Paul, and their 2 young daughters, the loss is permanent. Paul has stated that the family's focus now is on protecting the girls from the public attention the case has attracted. Nicola Bulley's disappearance gripped the UK for over 3 weeks, not just because of the mystery itself, but because it unfolded in real time under the unblinking gaze of the media, the internet, and the public. What began as a routine Friday morning walk ended in one of the most high-profile missing person investigations in recent memory, a case that revealed not only the fragility of life, but also the modern tendency for tragedy to become a public spectacle. Nicola Bulley's story stands as a reminder that in the search for answers, truth can be complicated, fragile, and sometimes deeply uncomfortable. And while the investigation may have ended, the questions, for many, still remains. You're watching Trace of Evil. Subscribe if you want the truth, because in the dark, truth is the only thing left to find.